that are here this evening, city staff, and to those on Coachco that I'm sure are following in great numbers. Thank you for accepting that we present to you this evening our thoughts of the issue of the storage tanks over the last 3 weeks. It's my pleasure to present what I'll call a newcomer. He's been in town for 10 years. He believed in Cornwall, and he thought he would invest in Cornwall. And he now owns Kelsey's restaurant, and he's a Chamber of Commerce president. Kevin Hargreaves.
Welcome, Kevin.
It's not often that on the social side, maybe on the business side, we present together, but I thought it was very important that you hear from somebody else other than Chuck Charlebois. And I'd like Kevin, if you would start off.
As previously mentioned during the peaceful protest down at the site of the tanks, basically the community has just spoken and said that they don't want these things down on the waterfront. There's been great work done for future development down there, and having these storage tanks is an eyesore regardless of what kind of fences or shrubbery or anything else they can think of to try and hide these things. Bottom line is they are not going to be invisible. They are going to be there. I know some people who do have units in Cotton Mill Lofts. This is an eyesore in their backyard. I know there's more development going on for the other units down there, and they made it clear to me and to Chuck that they want us to do our due diligence along with members of council and the city to do what we can to stop this.
That was easy. That was easy. Yeah. Gentlemen, ladies, we have an issue before us. We've been there, we've done that before with previous storage tanks. And I'm going to give you this evening what your fellow citizens believe is going on in this town. I want to highlight Ellen Kennedy's presentation at the public meeting. I want to highlight Dick Obrey, who's in Florida right now, couldn't be here. Of course, Ed Lumley, and you mentioned a while ago Phil Corey, past mayors of the city of Cornwall, that are just shaking their heads. Also, you've heard from Akwesasne. Total disrespect there, and not including them, and in discussions of lands, especially with what's going on in their activities for land claims and things of that nature. Councillor Glenn Grant, if I'm going to that meeting tomorrow, you pushed enough buttons to get me there. Mayor, Mr. Mayor, you listen and you make suggestions, and of course now you got to live with the actions I'm going to take this evening. I want to highlight.
I'm prepared.
You're prepared. That's good. I want to highlight Ken Bedford, Steve Alexander, and Mark Willow, because we started, oddly enough, where your clerk comes from, your new clerk, in Saint-Anne-de-Bellevue some 15 years ago. And in all the cities we visited, and at least 17 of them, we've seen this kind of stuff before, and the actions that people took, and the reasons why they took the actions. Reclaim the lands is what you hear. Leisure activities, you've heard some tonight, you'll see all these bicycles down the path. You don't need this stuff. So allow me to follow. This is what your citizens are saying. At the friendly protest, no to the tanks. We had a public meeting. Attendance was great. The message was clear. No. Media reports. Can you believe I have 2 scrapbooks? This is media reports for the last 3 weeks. This alone tells you there's a problem. When you get this kind of coverage, it's not because I got a nice face. It's because there's an issue there and it's touched off some buttons and some people want some action. Talk shows, polls. One polled 300 people, not one for this program. Presentations and concerns from historians. from the business community. You heard from the chamber. Not here this evening is another one of our supporters, but they'll have PIA. The city's waterfront committee, your own group that you appointed, okay, said no. People that have spent millions of dollars on the waterfront right now, and that are planning to spend millions more in the next year, 2 and 3 and 4, say no. The area residents say no. But guess what? I'm getting calls from Ottawa, from Lancaster. They're laughing. They're wondering, how can this happen in a town like Cornwall going the way you're going? They say no. Our neighbors to the south, I mentioned a while ago, we can't do anything without considering the people from Akwesasne. 14,000 people approximately live in those 3 reserves. They shop here in Cornwall. They have land claims. They need to be contacted. They need to be respected. That's what they ask. That's what they fight for. Well, guess what? That's what the people that we talk to say. The movers and the shakers, the community builders, all the volunteers such as John and his group this evening, they're all working to make this town better. That's all we want. And in this exercise, nobody knew nothing. And I'll repeat that. Nobody knew nothing. It's impossible. Okay? But that being the case, City Council took some action last week, 2 weeks ago I should say, and we passed the motion with a bylaw. Even that, you had to have a little bit of guts to do that, because you knew it was going to create a reaction. So I commend you for that. The main thing, all of council was against this. Period. Legal options. I've never called so many lawyers and asked for so many favors in the last week and a half about what do you do in a case like this? And the bottom line, folks, and we'll talk about it in a minute, it's the lease. All these comments are coming about and nobody's seen the lease that I know. Well, how can you make a decision based on that? It's not a good business decision, I'm sure. I've had time to discuss this with, and in particular, I'll name him because I asked his permission, John McDonald, and he gave me some advice on some of the things I should talk about tomorrow. But these questions must be answered. It's not a request and please. You must get the answers to that lease. The bottom line, the decision makers, federally and municipally, is no thanks. That's the bottom line. And yes, it's going to cost money, so let's get to that point. It's even been suggested that the city should pay for some of that. I don't think so. Now, somewhere down the road, your body, the municipal body, and the federal body will have to decide who's going to pay for this. I'll let you have that discussion. I'm not versed in that stuff. This is a total catastrophe. A total breakdown in communications. Not my words, the words of people in the city and at the federal government. Our representatives at the feds have made that statement many times. So here's the action needed. A request from the federal government to stop the issue, to stop work order on this project. Now, they've not worked lately. I don't know if that's a stop order or if that was just somebody said, you know. Was there anything more insulting when we had our protest than to have them keep the bulldozers going? Total decision. Well, we got to make sure, we're suggesting that you make sure, certainly I will, that we ask for a stop order. The lease must be looked at. There is a policy in this country, freedom of information. We can get that lease. We need the time to review that lease, and the legal minds that be need the time to read it, understand it, and give you some opinion. There was a lease previously for the 5 storage tanks that were there. Paul Fitzpatrick pulled that out for me before he, a couple of years before he left, and I believe it's with planning department. Now, people will say, well, what good does that lease do? Well, first of all, it tells us what language they usually speak on their federal leases. I don't understand where they're coming from. What kind of clauses applied there before that do they apply now? We don't know. Are there any conditions in the present lease that says they can build 3 more tanks? 2 more? Is there any conditions in the current lease that say we can store other products there? We don't know. The lease we need is that copy of that lease, and we need to understand it. There was mentioned by somebody that, oh, it's only for 10 years. My good God, can you imagine if that lease has 10 years plus an option to have 10 more? From a business point of view, you would think you want to amortize that over 20 years. You don't want to pay all your costs up front. So it would make sense, but then again, we don't know. Our citizens want answers, and that's where the pressure is, unfortunately or fortunately, whatever, is on you people. You're the ones that are going to fight this case tomorrow in Ottawa, and hopefully down the road. And I don't know what you've done with your legal counsel or where you're at with that, and I'll leave that in your good hands. But my role tomorrow is to express what I've done tonight and to ask City Council to reaffirm their position of 2 weeks ago. And that it's very clear they don't want the tanks. I want to touch on just one thing in closing, Mr. Mayor. There's blame here, blame there. It doesn't matter anymore. Who didn't advise who or whatever. Mistakes were made, we don't know. What we do know is that the condition we have today is not the one we want. And that's what we must focus on. And that, I think, is the message you got to clearly state. Clearly state that regardless of who made the mistake, it's not the best land use for the citizens of the city of Cornwall and our residents to the south. Again, I want to thank Kevin for being here this evening with me, and I'm sure that he's ready to answer any questions if you so happen.